Right now on Morning News Now, Hunter Biden in court. This morning, the president's son is set to formally plead guilty to a series of charges, his legal team saying it marks the end of half a decade of legal troubles. But for President Biden and his family, the political issues may only just be beginning. What we're learning about Hunter Biden's plea deal and pushback from House Republicans. Also this morning, under the microscope. This morning, the special counsel is digging into a 2020 meeting where former President Trump was briefed on U.S. election integrity. Details on that meeting and its possible significance as the threat of a third indictment looms. Plus, a basketball scare. This morning, Bronny James, the son of basketball icon LeBron James, is on the road to recovery. The young star went into cardiac arrest and collapsed during a basketball workout. We're digging into the questions about how this could have happened. And we'll have expert advice for parents who are worried about their children playing sports. And a soccer showdown. In just hours, the U.S. women's national team will face off against the Netherlands in a rematch of the 2019 World Cup final. We're breaking down the hotly anticipated match that could determine the winner of Group E as the Stars and Stripes face off against the Orange.
I think this time tomorrow we're going to have a lot of sleepy soccer fans who have not gotten a lot of rest watching the game.
No doubt about that.
Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Stephen Romo in for Savannah Sellers today. And we begin this morning in Delaware, where Hunter Biden is set to appear in court later today to face tax-related charges.
The president's son is expected to ratify a plea deal with prosecutors and plead guilty to 2 federal misdemeanor counts of failing to pay his taxes. He also faces a separate felony gun possession charge. That is likely to be dismissed if he meets certain conditions, according to court documents. It's the culmination of a 5-year-long investigation, which concluded that Hunter Biden did not pay taxes in 2017 and 2018, despite owing more than $100,000. He has since paid back the debt with interest. NBC News investigative correspondent Tom Winter is in Wilmington, Delaware, and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos is here with us in New York with a closer look at today's hearing. So, Tom, Biden is expected to plead guilty. What can we expect from today's hearing?
Right, so this should be a hearing where really we don't have a ton of surprises today, because not only do we know what the charges are, and you laid them out, but we also know how he's going to plead, which is guilty as part of a plea agreement. Now, we haven't seen those documents yet, but bottom line here is this is a 5-year-plus investigation. They're looking at tax issues. NBC News and others have well reported on those problems, and it's for somebody that earned over $1.5 million and then failed to pay over $100,000 worth of taxes. That's for the years 2017 and 2018, and that felony gun charge that you mentioned, that stems back to October of 2018, where apparently he had a gun while also using or abusing drugs, according to the charge. And so that's going to go to pretrial diversion, a pretrial diversion agreement. And as you suggested, if he successfully completes the parameters of that, it's possible that those charges could then be dismissed. Not expected to get jail time, though sentencing will be determined at a later date.
All right, and Danny, tell us about those 2 misdemeanor tax charges and that felony gun charge. Just how serious are we talking here? Typically jail time with these?
It's a complicated question. Straight up a federal misdemeanor, you can expect to get a probation-only sentence. I mean, even the lowest level felony calls for 0 to 6 months in the sentencing guidelines. But another question is whether or not a misdemeanor should have been brought for these tax crimes. So that is something that I think reasonable minds can disagree about, because some will say, look, in tax cases, you work it out. You don't necessarily bring charges. But on the other hand, there was a lot of money involved here. So it's fair to say that this could have been charged as a crime and was properly charged as a crime. The part that I think there's a clearer answer is the federal gun charge. Rare is the case that this is something that is offered pretrial diversion, which is a free bite at the apple. It means that if you enter into probation, you stay out of trouble, you come back, and the government usually dismisses the case. I'm not aware of pretrial diversion ever being offered in a federal gun case. Frankly, I'm not aware of it being offered in any case in the federal system. Happens all the time in state cases, DUI cases, low-level drug cases, but virtually nothing in federal court is a low-level anything. So pretrial diversion statistically isn't even, or historically hasn't even been offered by the majority of districts in the United States. So I am correct when I say it is rare. Was it appropriate in this case? Maybe. But if so, I'm very interested in it for my clients. And if the government's going to start offering it, I'm in line.
So speaking of rare, Tom, Congress got involved in a criminal case. We don't see that. Republicans in Congress took action yesterday trying to persuade the judge on how to proceed. What can you tell us about that?
Right. So one of the congressmen, the actual chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, sent a letter through his attorney to the court yesterday and effectively saying, look, we have a whole bunch of things we want to present to you. And we know that one of those things was some of the information from Hunter Biden's tax returns. We don't have the full letter and we don't have all the documents because at some point there's a back and forth that occurs between Hunter Biden's attorneys and the attorney for the congressman, effectively saying, hey, you can't file that type of stuff to the docket. We haven't agreed to that. And then apparently there's some sort of miscommunication at the clerk's office where that letter and those associated documents are taken down. The judge wants to know exactly what happened and is threatening sanctions for Hunter Biden's attorneys. It's all really complicated. We expect it all to be worked out this morning before things really get underway for Biden's guilty plea. And we don't anticipate that it'll impact that guilty plea or any follow-on sentence.
And Danny, I wanted to ask you quickly here. I know that Hunter Biden, of course, expected to sign off on this agreement, but what about the judge? Is she bound to this?
I have to tell every client, as all criminal defense attorneys do, that the judge isn't required to accept the plea agreement. He or she may reject it. And that does happen from time to time, but very, very rarely, especially in a case like this, where both sides are very much on board. And it's a situation where the government is asking or going to ask for a probation-only sentence. So in all likelihood, the judge will accept it. But you always have to advise your client there is a possibility the judge may reject this plea agreement. And it does happen, albeit rare.
All right. A lot to watch. Tom, Danny, thank you both.
This morning, it seems to be business as usual for former President Donald Trump, who's on the campaign trail while facing the possibility of a second federal indictment. Trump spent the day yesterday in New Orleans stumping for votes. A little more than a week ago, he announced that he is the target of special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into alleged interference in the 2020 election. Trump has denied any wrongdoing. NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley joins us now with the latest on this. Ryan, good morning. So during his rallies, how's Trump handling the possibility of yet another federal indictment?
You know, he made some brief comments about the situation when asked about it by NBC News. Take a listen.
President Trump, are you concerned about your own people testifying before the special counsel?
Thank you very much. No, we're innocent. We're totally innocent. We have a bunch of crooked people running this country. They're dishonest and they're crooked people running this country.
So this really is Trump sort of taking this in stride. Obviously, I think he sort of preempted a lot of the news on the special counsel by publicly announcing that he had received this target letter, which essentially means he's almost guaranteed to be charged. It's really just a matter of timing at this point. Yesterday, from what we could tell, at least publicly, none of the grand jurors were in the building. The grand jurors have been hearing this evidence of with the special counsel investigation, who have been looking into some of these issues, who have heard testimony last week from one of Donald Trump's top aides, who was with him in the months leading up to January 6th. So we don't know exactly what happened or whether there was a change in plans, but the next day that they typically are expected to come in to session is Thursday. Of course, all of this could be thrown out the window and changed, and we saw that in Florida, where they had a special session on a day that the grand jury was not expected to meet the day afterwards. So, theoretically, the grand jury could be meeting today for all we know. And I know there's a lot of security around this. In previous cases, we've seen grand jurors brought in vans to the courthouse, and then, if they don't come down for lunch, it's really difficult for us to see them. So because of the unprecedented nature of this, I think it would be reasonable to suspect that the court is taking some precautions to extra protect the identities of those grand jurors who are hearing these critical charges.
So as we wait, Ryan, we are learning that the special counsel is looking into a meeting that then President Trump had. It was back in February 2020, where he was briefed on election security. What do we know about that meeting? Why could that be significant?
Yeah, the significance of this is that Donald Trump apparently made some comments about how secure the election system was, and was apparently a little bit surprised. If you just think back and remember, Donald Trump has been saying this stuff for years. In the lead up to 2016, when he was expected to lose the election by a lot of pundits, he was already sort of warning that there was going to be fraud. after he won the Electoral College, his ego still wouldn't allow him to admit that he lost the popular vote. So he even set up this commission during his presidency to look into these cases of voter fraud. And, any expert on this who you ask who has any experience at all says that mass voter fraud is not a problem. And that's essentially what his committee was not able to find. And his Justice Department brought only a handful of election integrity cases during the entire 4 years he was in office. So this just isn't a problem. And I think that that's sort of what this meeting highlights, is that the election system is secure, and no one could reasonably believe these sort of absurd election lies that there was this mass voter fraud in 2020.
So, Ryan, Jack Smith is also investigating Trump's handling of classified documents. Trump has already been indicted in that case. He maintains he's done nothing wrong. But we've now learned that there were a total of 8 search warrants filed in connection with how he handled those documents after he left office. Real quick, help us understand. Does this mean prosecutors are looking at 7 other locations or people?
The number sometimes can get a little bit dicey. I think that that's, it's just a broader investigation that they've looked into a number of issues in connection with this. But it is a signal, I think, that this is not fully wrapped up. They're still continuing to interview people. That investigation is ongoing, and it sort of signals that this one could be too. This is obviously the Jack Smith investigation into January 6th and the lead up to the election, or in the lead up, the aftermath of the election is really wide spanning. So you could see a situation where Donald Trump is indicted, but the investigation continues.
All right, Ryan. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, turning now to an alarming situation that startled the world of basketball and beyond. Bronny James, the son of NBA icon LeBron James, is now in stable condition after suffering cardiac arrest during basketball practice at the University of Southern California. NBC News contributing correspondent Kaylee Hartung has those details.
Hey there, he has got one of the most famous names in all of sports, but LeBron James Jr. hasn't even taken the floor for a college basketball game yet. On Monday, he suffered a medical crisis here at USC as he gets ready for his freshman year. The details, they're still unfolding.
The son of a basketball superstar facing a medical emergency. Bronny James rushed to the ER during a practice Monday at the University of Southern California. A family spokesperson saying while practicing, Bronny James suffered a cardiac arrest. Medical staff was able to treat Bronny and take him to the hospital. He's now in stable condition and no longer in ICU. The 18-year-old is the son of NBA legend LeBron James and one of the most highly touted incoming college basketball players. He was preparing for his first season on the USC basketball team when the incident happened at 9:26 a.m.
Engine to rescue 15 unconscious, 3400 South Figueroa.
Earlier this summer, Bronny James starring in the McDonald's All-American game, his dad cheering him on.
He's just proud, my dad,
LeBron not shy about his wish to one day share the court with his son.
Being with him, spending a full year with him in the same uniform, that would be the icing on the cake.
DeMar Hamlin, who suffered cardiac arrest on the football field earlier this year, tweeting, "Prayers to Bronny and the James family as well. Here for you guys, just like you have been for me my entire process." Cardiac arrest is the leading cause of death for young athletes, and African-American college basketball players like James are the population at the highest risk, according to a study in the American Heart Association Journal.
What could have led to this?
There are multiple factors that can cause cardiac arrest, whether it's something that they've had, like a disease in the heart, so it's congenital, or something that they developed after having an infection.
Doctors with this advice for parents of athletes of any age.
Any student that's going to start any sport should do a pre-participation physical, and that includes an evaluation of their medical history, and then also asks the appropriate questions.
And experts encourage parents to ask their child's school or athletic facility if they have an emergency action plan in writing that includes a defibrillator, that AED that can shock a heart back into rhythm, they say could be a lifesaver. Back to you.
Important stuff. Kaylee Hartung, thank you for that. And joining us now for more, Dr. Dave Montgomery. He's a board-certified cardiologist and a managing partner at Prevent Clinic. So, good morning, doctor. Thanks so much for joining us today. So let's start with that shocking part of this, how something like this could happen to a seemingly healthy, young, physically active person like Bronny James. We heard in this piece he's part of the demographic that is most affected by cardiac arrest. So why is this, and should parents be thinking about this when they send their kids to play sports?
Yeah. Good morning to you, Stephen. So, there are two main reasons, or two common reasons, for a young, healthy athlete to have this. One is a structural problem with the heart, either congenital or something that one's acquired, where the actual tissue causes a heart rhythm abnormality to stop the heart. Okay, arrest means to stop the heart. The other one is in a structurally normal heart where the electricity is abnormal. Here's a really important point. I know there was that study by the American Heart Association. This is not necessarily an outlier in African Americans. That's going to be a misconception. The two commonest kinds of cardiac arrest in young athletes are not more predominant in African Americans. We've just seen it, right? So we just saw it with Damar Hamlin. We're seeing it with Bronny James. So that might be there. But for example, long QT syndrome or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy are not more common in African Americans. Really important for us to understand that.
Absolutely important. Also important to note, sudden cardiac arrest, not the same as a heart attack. A lot of times those two things are mixed up. So what are the differences there?
Yeah, so a cardiac arrest just means that the heart stops beating. And there are a number of reasons, as we hit on a few of them, for a cardiac arrest. A heart attack is very different. Heart attack suggests that there is a blood vessel that is blocked for any number of reasons. The main reason is a plaque that forms and disrupts the blood flow to that part of the heart. Depending on where that is, it can have a large effect or a small effect. A heart attack can, if the heart attack is large enough, cause the heart to stop. If it's smaller, and we see this in much older people, for example, the risk factors for heart attack, much older, if the heart stops, obviously, due to the lack of blood flow, you can have a similar kind of a situation where you arrest the heart.
So if someone happened to be present when someone appears to be going into cardiac arrest, losing consciousness, that type of thing, what should we do?
Yeah, so really important message here, Stephen. We all should know hands-only CPR. It saves lives. Go to the American Heart Association. There are videos that show you we don't have to do mouth-to-mouth anymore, Stephen, as you know. And I think that Kaylee made a really good point in her lead. That is that all parents that have their kids in performance, high-performance sports should demand a pre-participation screen. Now, I'm going to add something to that. That includes a cardiovascular evaluation. It's important for us to understand in the American guidelines, it doesn't recommend that all children who participate in sports have that heart evaluation. I am sort of an outlier in that regard. I think we should. The Italians have led the way in this, and they say no matter what the cost effectiveness is, we are going to screen our kids because when you lose one child to cardiac arrest, it is more important than the cost savings that might occur from screening a large population.
And the peace of mind that screening could bring parents. No doubt they would enjoy that. Dr. Dave Montgomery, important insights. Thank you.
The nation's largest package carrier, UPS, has reached a tentative deal with more than 340,000 of its workers. The deal averts a strike that could have had a crippling impact coast to coast. This is the latest resolution to a spike in labor disputes this summer. Here's NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson.
Yeah, this was certainly a crisis averted. The nation's largest package carrier finally coming to an 11th hour agreement with the union representing 340,000 of its workers. A strike would have easily had ramifications for the U.S. economy. Now there is an agreement, but this is far from the only industry facing a labor battle. In the dead heat of an emerging summer of strikes, UPS reaching a tentative agreement with its 340,000 worker-strong Teamsters union, avoiding a potentially economy-rattling labor action. The union, whose members still need to ratify the deal, saying it secured a new 5-year contract, boosting Teamster wages and solidifying safety issues.
But I think it's a great victory for the labor movement in general. We actually took on corporate America and won today.
In a statement, UPS said the deal provides industry-leading pay and benefits while retaining the flexibility we need to stay competitive. But in what's being dubbed a hot labor summer, so much remains on the line.
And used without our permission.
A day of action highlighting the ongoing actors and writers strike.
We will not have you take away our right to work and earn a decent living.
Those picket lines, with potential to expand, 150,000 auto workers began negotiations for a new contract with U.S. automakers this month. More than 26,000 American Airlines flight attendants preparing to vote on strike authorization. And local actions, like an ongoing Los Angeles hotel worker strike, drags on for weeks.
Workers, whether they're in the hotel industry, whether they are in the logistics, whether they are in the entertainment industry, they are feeling economic pressure and economic insecurity.
And while several of the disputes are fueled by traditional wage disagreements, there are huge fears over new technologies like AI.
There is tremendous insecurity among workers about being displaced by new technology.
And back here in Hollywood, actors and writers, of course, still on the picket lines out in the heat, all in a labor dispute that is forecasted to stretch on for weeks, if not months. Back to you.
All right, Steve, thank you so much. Now for a closer look at the extreme heat that is still hitting the country from coast to coast. Let's get a check on your Morning News Now forecast.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with the details. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning to you both. Yeah, still hitting us and hitting us hard. We're looking at temperatures into the triple digits. Once again, it's far reaching, it's intense. And look at these numbers. Compared to this time yesterday, we're looking at 108 million people impacted by a heat alert. Those numbers will probably go up, but that's a lot of people. We're looking at those alerts stretching from the south central states to the central plains and northern plains, the Midwest, into the Northeast. We have an excessive heat warning. That's for Phoenix, where you see that hot pink color in the Southwest. And we have an excessive heat watch that goes into effect on Friday in Philadelphia. We're going to break some records in the Northeast. The good news is we're going to see a turnaround by Sunday. I'll show you that in just a minute, at least in the Northeast. We're looking at that area of high pressure. That's that heat dome tacked in place. It's not budging. So it's pushing that jet stream far to the north. That's allowing all this hot air to come in. Think of it almost like a heat pump. And that's why it's so far reaching. We're looking at the Southwest, the South Central states, into the Midwest and Northern Plains, also in the Northeast, and so many triple digits on the map here. Phoenix 118, El Paso 105, Lubbock 102 today, Dallas 102, 100 degrees in Wichita. You factor in the humidity, it's going to feel warmer than it is. So St. Louis, 100 degrees today, that's your expected high temperature. You factor in the humidity, it will feel like 104. And we're looking at Minneapolis feeling like 100 degrees today. That's today. Then we go towards tomorrow. So we look towards the Northeast and we are going to look at sweltering temperatures. D.C. feeling like 105 on Thursday. Same story in New York City. The air temperature 98 degrees, but you need to factor in the humidity because that's what it feels like on your body. So we're looking at 90s all across the Midwest, the Great Lakes into the Northeast, and then we're looking at those hundreds down to portions of the plains. Now, as we go throughout Friday and Saturday, we're going to keep it hot in Boston, 88 degrees on Saturday. But look at that big dip by Sunday, 78 degrees. Same story in New York. We're going to get a front that comes through late Saturday into Sunday, and that's going to give us some relief by Sunday. So much better feeling in New York City by Sunday, 83 degrees. Same story in D.C. Still warm near 90 degrees, but at least not 98 degrees. We're not going to see any relief, though, in the Southeast, the South Central states by this weekend. We're looking at temperatures still in the triple digits on Sunday in Dallas, near 100 degrees in Houston, and near 96 degrees in Albany, Georgia. So that's the heat story. We're also looking at the chance for severe weather. Once again, we have all this heat and humidity and a front moving through. That's going to spark some storms in the Great Lakes. We could see some really strong storms. We're seeing some heavy rain right now. Remember, warmer atmosphere holds a lot more moisture, so any of these downpours could create some flash flooding. 24 million people at risk, guys. We're looking at winds gusting up to 65 miles per hour. Could see some hail and watching the chance for a few tornadoes. And then that storm threat returns to the northeast on Thursday. We'll talk more about that next hour.
You describe it as like a heat pump. I would like to break the heat pump, if that's at all possible,
Yeah.
Michelle.
Unplug it.
Exactly.
Yeah, just unplug that thing.
That'll work too. All right. Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it. Coming up, game over. Some gamers are avoiding certain video games because of what they say is a toxic environment. We're digging into the world of mental health and gaming and what you need to know.
Plus, Israel is facing a democratic crisis this morning after leaders push through a controversial overhaul plan. The fallout and potential economic impact. That's coming up next.
We're back with the latest on the turmoil in Israel after its parliament passed a controversial bill that weakens the power of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, the bill is part of a broader plan to overhaul the judiciary, a decision that sparked widespread protests in Israel. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv with more. So, Raf, it seems these protests have subsided a bit. They started months back. They got massive at times. So what's the situation like there this morning?
Guys, good morning. Yeah, that's right. The protests themselves appear to have subsided, at least for the moment, though we are expecting them to flare up again this weekend, especially here in Tel Aviv, which has been the epicenter of the protest movement. Instead, this fight has moved kind of from the streets to the courts, and specifically to the Supreme Court, which is ironic given that this legislation is designed to curb the power of the Supreme Court. The Israeli Bar Association, the Israeli political parties in the opposition are petitioning the court Court. They are asking the judges there to strike down this law. And if the justices do so, then, guys, we are in totally uncharted constitutional waters. Nobody knows what that leads to. Potentially, you have a constitutional crisis in this country. People also keeping a very close eye on the military. Tens of thousands of military reservists have said they will not serve in protest at this law, and that could have an effect on the military's operational readiness.
So, Raph, I mean, beyond the protests, it looks like we're starting to see even more political fallout to the plan. New polls out just yesterday made for some pretty grim reading, I have to imagine, for Prime Minister Netanyahu and his far-right coalition partners. I mean, what are the polls saying?
Yeah, that's right. These were not the polls that Netanyahu was hoping for after getting this legislation through. There's a couple of them, but they basically all tell the same story. Netanyahu way down. Right now, he and his right-wing and religious allies have 64 seats in Israel's 120-seat parliament. They have a majority. These polls show that coalition going down into the low 50s, losing the majority. It shows Netanyahu's party would no longer be the single biggest party in parliament. That title would go to one of the opposition parties. And these polls also just asked Israelis how they were feeling more generally about the country. Some pretty alarming trends. 56% of Israelis say they are worried about the possibility of civil war, and a quarter say they're thinking about leaving the country. Guys.
Wow. And Raph, quickly here, it's not just political fallout. Financial institutions like Morgan Stanley, Moody's also sounding the alarm. What's their response been?
Yeah, real drumbeat of bad economic news. Moody's, the financial rating agency, saying it has concerns that political, social tension are going to continue into the long term because of this legislation. It's making Israel a less attractive place to invest, and potentially it could make Israel's ability to borrow more expensive, which is something that people would feel on the street here. The Israeli shekel, the currency, is down about 10% against the dollar since the beginning of the year. A lot of that is attributed to the politics here. So some grim economic news alongside the political news, guys.
Lots of fallout. All right, Raph, thanks so much.
More international headlines now. A firefighting plane has crashed in southern Greece.
Claudio Lavanga joins us now from Rome with that and more. Good morning, Claudio.
Good morning, guys. That's right. 2 Greek Air Force pilots died after their plane crashed while they were fighting wildfires on the island of Evia. Now, footage shows their plane crashing into a hillside and bursting into flames. Now, separately, state media reported the body of a missing 41-year-old has been found, bringing the known death toll up to at least 3 people killed by the wildfires. The Prime Minister warning of tough days ahead as the fires have been raging on the Greek islands for a week now and continue to destroy homes and force evacuations. Now to Thailand, where self-exiled former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra is planning to return to the country after fleeing in 2008. His daughter shared on social media that he plans to return on August the 10th, saying, quote, "This decision to come home is something that Dad has seriously spoken about since the beginning of 2022. Shinawatra will face a potential jail term of up to 10 years for multiple cases in which he was convicted by Thailand's Supreme Court. Thaksin has previously indicated he will return to Thailand in July. And we end up at Sotheby's for a rare sight of Apple-branded sneakers. These ultra-rare shoes are believed to have been custom-made for employees in the late 80s and 90s. They are currently listed on the auction house website for at least $50,000. The white tennis are men's US size 10.5 and feature the old-school rainbow Apple logo on both the tongue and on the side. The shoes are new but might display signs of age, just as some yellowing. Now, guys, who knew that Apple went from software to hardware to footwear, even though we don't know whether those are hard to wear?
No kidding. I feel like they should bring those back now.
Totally.
I feel like Apple should be like, all right, we're getting in the shoe game now. All right, Claudia, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Coming up, we are taking a look at how your gut health impacts your mental health.
Interesting. Plus, the simple trick that one study says could be the key to breaking some of your bad habits. Your medical checkup is coming up next. We're back now with your weekly health checkup. Today, we'll be looking at the connection between the mind and the gut and the role the relationship plays in your overall brain health.
Plus, how exercises like wall sits and planks may help managing your blood pressure. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel joins us to discuss some of the health headlines you may have missed. Dr. Patel, good morning. So first of all, new research presented last week at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference suggests gut health is linked to brain health. In what ways, Dr. Patel?
Yeah, Joe, Stephen, look, we've known that the microbiome, or essentially the kind of tension between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria in your gut, play a huge amount in your health. But this is kind of a new discovery that researchers have found about how it can play in your brain health. And essentially, several studies found that the amount of good bacteria you have can really influence how much you actually age and how healthy your brain ages. Or put it another way, if you have a lot of bad bacteria and you're constipated, you can actually add on kind of years of cognitive decline, and that turns into basically experiencing early signs of dementia or having poor memory and recall. So this all adds up to the doctor's orders for today, where first, prioritize movement. We find that people that are constipated often have issues with their diet, but they're often pretty sedentary. And then second, try to make sure that you're eating fiber-rich foods, because everything has to do with getting that good bacteria in there in the form of fiber, as well as considering a probiotic. So if you're somebody that doesn't have regular bowel movements, if you find yourself constipated, not going to the bathroom for 2 to 3 days, this could alone be something you could change that could help your brain health.
And Dr. Patel, eager to hear more about this next study. It concerns bad habits, that self-help approach that might be able to help them, stuff like biting your nails or picking your skin. Research found that there might be a simple trick, which sort of sounds like one of those internet ads. A simple trick might be able to help you. What can you tell us about this trick?
Yeah, it does sound like a simple trick, Stephen, and this is exactly what researchers set out to find. They actually use social media to recruit people that have very specific body-focused repetitive behaviors, exactly what you said, things like biting nails, sometimes picking at certain parts of your skin, pulling certain parts of your hair. This is actually quite common in all across the world. People do it, and they often do it because of a result of emotions. It starts as a result of negative emotions, and then it just becomes a habit. So researchers set out to find through social media, could they recruit people to focus on a self-help intervention? And the self-help intervention, and they recruited over 100 people to do this, self-help intervention was to basically teach people how to change these repetitive behaviors, and you do it gently. And they recommend things like just softly taking your hands and rubbing the backside of your forearm several times a day, even doing things like kind of just moving your hands in this type of motion, or if you have a ring, just kind of twisting with your ring slowly, softly, not to injure yourself. And lo and behold, they found that for about half of the people that did this on their own without any other instruction, that it did help. So the doctor's orders here, be gentle with yourself. May not work for everyone, but probably worth a try while you seek professional help.
All right, Dr. Patel, let's quickly run through this last one. Almost half of Americans have high blood pressure, and a new study says prioritizing planks and wall sits may help keep it under control. So if you could demonstrate a wall sit on that wall behind you, just kidding. Why is this?
So very quickly, I'm laughing because every gym teacher I ever had made me do a wall sit. And I thought, why on earth am I doing a wall sit? Turns out all exercise is great for you in many ways, including lowering your blood pressure. But the exercise that could help the most are when you actually are using your muscles in a stationary position. By the way, those are planks, wall sits, and even squatting. So the doctor's orders here, switch up your exercises and try a wall sit every now and again. It could help your blood pressure.
All right, sounds good. We won't make you demonstrate because we're tight on time. Dr. Kavita Patel, as always, thank you so much. Let's shift to mental health now. Playing video games with friends and family is a great way to bond and spend time together, even decompress. But according to a new study, a growing number of players are actually avoiding certain games, blaming a toxic culture within some gaming communities.
And that's having a huge impact not only on individual players, but on the entire gaming industry. Joining us now to talk about this is Dr. Rachel Cowart, Research Director for the nonprofit mental health organization Take This. Dr. Cowart, good morning. Thanks for joining us today. And before we actually get to that study, which Take This produced along with Nielsen, if you could explain to us briefly what your initiative is all about and what your mission is.
Of course. We are the oldest mental health nonprofit in the gaming space, and we aim to destigmatize mental health challenges and provide mental health information and support to both game players and game makers.
So let's talk about this survey. According to the survey, it appears that toxic players are the core demographic of digital games. Your survey showed 7 out of 10 players avoid playing certain games because of the reputation of that game's communities. So what should we know about that? How concerning is this?
Yeah, toxic gamer cultures are often a topic of discussion among parents and game players alike. And there seems to be this assumption that it is the core demographic. But what we're finding with this work is actually most people won't stand for it. They will avoid games completely based on their reputation. They will spend less money and less time in places where toxicity is rampant.
That makes sense. And Doctor, many gamers, of course, under the age of 18, and it seems like they're more likely to take action than older players against hate and harassment. And I'm curious why you think that is.
Yeah, I'm really encouraged that we found in our data that under 18 were less likely to spend money, they were less likely to stay, and they were more likely to avoid these communities. And I think it really speaks to a movement and a change that actually we don't want communities that are full of hate and harassment and cheating and all of these bad things. And so, yes, I'm encouraged that the younger players are the ones that are actually moving and shaking in this space.
So, Dr. Cowart, we know that toxic culture can have an impact economically on the gaming industry. Talk more about that.
Yeah, so really this study was about putting our money where our mouths are, because we talk a lot about the mental health impact of toxicity in games, which is a huge problem. It can lead to short-term to stress, to long-term, post-traumatic stress disorder symptomology. It's not something that's flippant. And so the fact that it's impacting the bottom line, I think, and I hope will get the attention of game makers, that we need to start refining the techniques that we already have in this space to make them less toxic.
All right, Dr. Cowart, thanks so much. Appreciate you having you on.
Thanks.
And turning now to movies. Following the success at the box office, Barbie is taking on a new role. The iconic doll is now highlighting some hot-button issues in Latin America. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber explains.
When it comes to Barbie Mania, even Latin America is jumping on for the ride. Vendors throughout the region cashing in, from a bright pink tortilla in Mexico
Salen muy ricas. Yo se las compro a mis nietos.
To a brand new restaurant in Ecuador, the spitting image of Barbie's iconic dream house. Even Latin American airlines are getting in on the fun. Volaris says this plane will be piloted by Barbie, not Ken. But the craze goes beyond the sparkle and glitter. In Peru, anti-government demonstrators dressing up as dictator Barbie with a rifle in hand, protesting the nation's president. In Mexico, a Barbie with what some say has become a lamentable traditional attire. This Barbie has boots, a black wide-brimmed hat, and a T-shirt with the photo of a missing man. Her name, Searching Mother Barbie. A tribute to the thousands of volunteers who fan out across Mexico searching for unmarked graves that might contain their children's remains. For Delia Quiroa, the creator of this latest version, it is a symbol of the pain and desperate search for Mexico's missing, like her brother, whose photo is now on the shirt of this doll.
Yo siempre estoy pensando en mi hermano. No hay un momento en el día que no esté pensando en él.
Her brother disappeared 9 years ago, joining the more than 100,000 Mexicans who have disappeared, often amid violent power struggles between the drug cartels.
Él era un joven muy alegre, era chef, le gustaba mucho cocinar.
She is now part of that volunteer group and advocates for other families with similar stories. And when she saw the Barbie craze, she saw an opportunity.
Nosotros la vestimos como vamos a las búsquedas.
She's been buying them in bulk from secondhand markets so she can dress more up and sell them to raise money for the search efforts.
Esta es una Barbie de edición especial.
She says she hopes this will help people sympathize with them. She plans to sell each Barbie for $30, but what they represent is worth so much more.
Yo le dije, Dios mío, yo voy a hacer esto de la Barbie, la asociación, y voy a ayudar gente, pero yo quiero que tú me regreses a mi hermano, que tú me ayudes a encontrarlo. Y aunque yo lo encuentre, yo voy a seguir ayudando personas.
It is a Barbie on a mission she does not wish on anyone else, but with a purpose that could one day help her find her brother.
And our thanks to Ellison Barber for that report. Coming up, some terrifying moments behind the wheel. A driver plunges off a California cliff.
How his phone helped lead rescuers right to him when he couldn't actually call for help. Next. We're back now with the story of a man who was rescued following a crash thanks to his iPhone. NBC News Digital reporter Maya Eaglin shows us just how the man was saved.
The dramatic rescue of a man whose car plunged 400 feet off an LA area cliff.
He had a major gash in his head that he had active bleeding. And so we had to stop the bleeding, bandage him up.
The key to saving his life? The iPhone in his pocket, equipped with crash detection technology and emergency SOS calling capability.
Without the SOS service from iPhone, I don't know when or if we would have ever found him.
After spotting bent guardrails and bark missing from trees, Mike Liam of LA County Search and Rescue descended from a helicopter hoping to find the driver. But rescuers only able to pinpoint his location thanks to his phone.
400 feet, we hit the bottom and then found his car in the stream and him ejected next to the car. He was able to be hoisted into the helicopter.
The crash detection feature now comes standard on the iPhone 14 and newer model Apple Watches. It was touted as a life-saving tool when it was launched last fall.
Now the microphone detects impact noise. The accelerometer senses rapid deceleration, and the barometer measures a shift in pressure consistent with an airbag going off.
Once a crash is detected, the phone sends a distress signal to the nearest 911 call center.
The owner of this iPhone was in a severe car crash and is not responding to their phone.
If there's no service, satellite picks up the location of the phone, providing a search radius for rescue crews, as was the case with this incident.
There's nothing to download. If you have a 14, or I believe it's a 14 Pro, it's already there. It's already built in.
The rescue crew says the technology also helped them find a woman who broke her leg while hiking in June. And if they didn't get to this victim when they did,
most likely he would have bled out at some point. Getting to him in a timely manner is what saved him.
That technology and the rapid response from the LA County Search and Rescue sparing this driver from what could have been a tragic outcome. Maya Eaglin, NBC News.
Fascinating stuff. All right, turning to financial headlines now. The FTC is working on a lawsuit this morning that could break up Amazon.
CNBC's Savannah Hanau joins us with that and other money news. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Good morning, Stephen. Yeah, so the Federal Trade Commission is finalizing its long-awaited antitrust lawsuit against Amazon, which could come as soon as next month and could result in breakup of the company. Now, Politico reports the lawsuit is likely to focus on challenges to Amazon Prime, rules the FTC says blocks lower prices on competing websites, and policies it believes forces merchants to use Amazon's logistics network and ad services. Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal both reported on the FTC's expected lawsuit earlier this year. TikTok is launching an e-commerce business in the U.S. to sell goods made in China, stepping up the competition with apps like Shein and Temu. Now, the Wall Street Journal reports that TikTok will store and ship items for manufacturers and merchants in China and will handle the marketing and transactions. It's also building an Amazon-like marketplace where users can view and buy items on one single page. And Microsoft is touting AI as demand for other parts of its business, such as the cloud, is cooling. The company has had special access to some of the most powerful and popular AI technology through its investment in OpenAI. That's the maker of ChatGPT. Now, on Microsoft's earnings call, CEO Satya Nadella says there's a complete new world of AI driving a new set of workloads. Last week, Microsoft unveiled plans to charge businesses $30 a month per person for access to Copilot. That's an AI-powered assistant from Microsoft 365, guys.
Wow, hard to keep up with all of those AI developments.
It really is.
Silvana, thanks so much.
You got it.
Well, the extreme heat and wildfires this year are forcing Americans to rethink their vacations as tourist spots around the world are feeling the brunt of extreme weather and climate change. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has more on how you should prepare for your next vacation.
From the American West to Southern Europe, much of the world's vacation destinations are unbearably hot, even on fire. The airport in Palermo, Italy, shut down as fire reached the perimeter. In Greece, a water drop plane crashed, killing 2 pilots as firefighters battled wind-driven flames across the islands. Already 2,500 have fled Corfu. NBC's Josh Letterman is on the island of Rhodes.
The beachside resorts are normally packed this time of year, but tourists are fleeing by the thousands. Package holiday companies now canceling trips while airlines bring in more airplanes to ferry people home.
Jim Papagiorgio arrived Friday from Michigan, then escaped on Saturday.
We were able to evacuate by car rather than head down to the beach like a lot of the tourists and be evacuated via boat.
104-degree temps have forced the Acropolis to close early, while a Delta plane flying from Milan to New York hit turbulence over Italy with softball-sized hail, causing serious damage. High temps, whether in Greece or Arizona, can affect airline departures.
In extreme heat, it will take longer to take off, and some airlines may have to cut weight with less passengers and baggage.
Before leaving for vacation, travel pros advise checking the extended weather forecast, monitor news of potential strikes or political instability, and consider cancel for any reason trip insurance.
If you've invested a lot of money in a trip and your money is non-refundable, it would behoove you to buy travel insurance.
But be warned, you can't buy travel insurance after extreme weather is already predicted to affect your vacation. Back to you.
Ooh, important note there, Tom. Thank you. Well, coming up, countdown to kickoff.
Team USA and the Netherlands face off tonight in a rematch of the 2019 World Cup final. We're breaking down the match and the players you should keep an eye on next. Welcome back. Yellow Skittles aren't just lemon flavored anymore, thanks to the latest unexpected food collaboration. And we love a food collaboration here. Skittles is teaming up with French's to make a mustard flavored variety of Skittles. It is a one-off release ahead of August 5th, which is, of course, the day you have on your calendars, National Mustard Day. Fun-size packs of the mustard candy will be given away for free through an online sweepstakes and at different pop-up events in Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and New York City. But is this a mustard try or a mustard avoid?
Avoid. That's an easy answer.
I would try it once and make it clear I didn't like it. And then, or you could just put it on a hot dog there, as they suggest there.
We'll try that. A crunchy hot dog. I love it. Well, Team USA's women are taking the pitch again tonight as they look to make it 2 wins out of 2 in the World Cup.
The team that will play the Netherlands, and it is a rematch of the previous World Cup final back in 2019. As we know, the U.S. won that one 2-0. Joining us now is Alicia Delgado. She is a senior editor for USA Today Sports. Good to have you on. So this is really a heavyweight battle on the cards already tonight. How tough is this one going to be for Team USA? I mean, do we think Netherlands has been like plotting revenge for 4 years now?
Possibly, yeah. So definitely a big rematch for them. I think the biggest deal about this game for this tournament is that the winner of this game will likely take the group, Group E, and have a much easier path to the final. So whoever wins this group could avoid Germany, Canada, England until the final. So that's a pretty big deal. But other than that, these two teams are a lot different than they were in 2019. The U.S., of course, has a lot of new fresh faces, new coach, and they're not battling equal pay, battling the federation like they were in 2019. For the Netherlands, their formation is going to look a lot different. Their attack's going to look different. They're missing their star attacker to an ACL injury. They're missing another forward to an ankle injury. So definitely 2 different teams in 2 different places from 2019, but an important matchup nonetheless.
It was Sophia Smith who came up clutch for Team USA in the last game against Vietnam, scoring twice. So which players are you expecting some big performances from tonight?
Yeah, Sophia Smith again for sure. Keep an eye on her always. Alex Morgan, the forwards. Norway has got really physical, aggressive defenders, so they're going to pressure our forwards a lot. I think Sophia Smith's going to have a pretty good matchup today against the center backs. But other than that, keep an eye on our center backs because they have a job to do with Netherlands attack too. So Julie Ertz, Vanna de Mello will need to step up again.
So we are now nearly a week into this year's World Cup. What are your early impressions? What teams are looking great so far?
Yeah, early impressions are things have been a lot closer between some of the smaller countries and the teams that for 4 years now everybody's been talking about. Like the rest of the world's catching up. Everybody's really progressing in the women's game, and we've kind of seen that with a lot of these closer matches. So, you know, you had the Philippines beat the Netherlands last night. Switzerland, Norway was a 0-0 draw. Jamaica drawing France, Canada and Nigeria. All of those games were somewhat surprising, but also just showcasing how the game is developing in some of these smaller countries.
So bottom line, analysts, are they picking a favorite between USA and Netherlands tonight?
I think it's safe to say that the U.S. is always the favorite at this point.
All right, that's good to know. Alicia, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining us. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But your news continues right now. Good morning. I'm Stephen Romo in for Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, in the spotlight, Hunter Biden is the focus of intense media attention this morning, facing federal charges of tax fraud and gun possession. We're going to have the latest on his hearing in federal court this morning and what it all means for the president's son. Also, coast-to-coast crisis. 2 new warnings highlighting the damage to our climate. First, that sweltering heat wave is moving east, with cities like New York and Washington bracing for triple-digit temps. We're going to dig into a new report on the extreme heat and the impact of fossil fuels. And a different report sounding the alarm on sky-high ocean temperatures in the Atlantic. Off the coast of Florida, it's threatening sensitive coral reefs and wildlife, but it could have an even larger impact sooner than expected on millions of people all around the world. The latest on all that just ahead. Plus, Hollywood on hold. 2 weeks into the Tinseltown shutdown, we're going to take a look at the economic impact and which industries have been hit the hardest, and if there is any end in sight. And back in the hot seat, it is a flashback match for Team USA and New Zealand tonight. They're facing off against their 2019 rivals, the Netherlands, for World Cup glory. We've got a preview of the action coming up later in the hour. Good to have you with us on this Wednesday morning. We're going to begin with the plea deal Hunter Biden is expected to enter into with prosecutors over tax-related charges he's facing.
Yeah, the president's son is set to appear in a Delaware court. He's expected to plead guilty to 2 federal misdemeanor counts of failing to pay his taxes. Biden also faces a separate felony gun possession charge. That's likely to be dismissed if he meets certain conditions. It comes as the House of Representatives is set to hear more testimony against him. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles has more.
And when the president's son appears in this courtroom behind me in just a couple of hours, his legal team hopes that it marks the end of his legal problems. But Republicans on Capitol Hill are insistent that their investigation into Biden's business dealings and its possible connection to his father, the president of the United States, is just beginning. Hunter Biden, the president's son, prepared to enter a Delaware courtroom this morning to formally plead guilty to a series of tax charges.
Mr. Biden's going to take responsibility for failing to timely pay his taxes.
Today's hearing the culmination of a 5-year investigation that concluded the president's son did not pay taxes in 2017 and 2018, despite owing more than $100,000. Biden has since paid back the tax bill with interest. Prosecutors are expected to recommend a sentence of probation instead of the maximum penalties for these charges, which include a year in jail for each tax offense and up to 10 years in jail for the felony gun charge that alleges that Biden was in possession of a firearm despite being a drug user. The gun charge would be dismissed after Biden completes a diversion program. Republicans not ready to move on.
Was it this Hunter Biden's operation, or was Joe Biden involved?
They are still aggressively pursuing an investigation into the younger Biden's business practices, and last week presented 2 IRS agents who claim he was given preferential treatment by the IRS and Department of Justice.
At every stage, decisions were made that benefited the subject of this investigation.
The Attorney General has denied those claims, and the White House says President Biden was not involved in Hunter Biden's business ventures. But his son's legal issues continue to be a political distraction for the president. Today's plea deal comes after Hunter Biden settled a long-running child support dispute last month with London Roberts, the Arkansas mother of a child he fathered in 2018. Roberts said in a court filing last year that the president and the first family, quote, remain estranged from the child, but Hunter Biden agreed in 2020 to pay some monthly child support. The White House has declined to discuss the issue. His political rivals have seized on it on the campaign trail. And back in Washington, House GOP members continue to try and link Hunter's business dealings to the president, though they have yet to produce any concrete evidence. even using the investigations to open the door to potential impeachment proceedings.
And there was a last-minute development in this case as we await for the court hearing later today. And that's when a Republican member of Congress informed the court that they believe that one of Hunter Biden's lawyers was attempting to impersonate someone else in a phone call to the court. It was enough for the judge to ask his legal team to explain themselves. They said the whole thing was a misunderstanding. It likely won't impact today's proceedings, but it's an example of how every single detail in this case is being closely scrutinized.
More developments on the way. Ryan, thank you.
Legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fedden joins us now to break down more of this case. So, Kristen, this was a pretty lengthy investigation, as we just heard from Ryan. It spanned 5 years. Is it possible we could hear any new information in court today from prosecutors about the findings, or is this likely to wrap up here today?
I think it's likely to wrap up here today, but I think one of the things that's going to really prolong the hearing is all of the new filings. As just previously reported, there was a new filing by the Heritage Foundation, that conservative think tank, as well as, filing led by Representative Jason Smith, just trying to submit new evidence with regard to the political bias in the Justice Department and how they gave Hunter Biden preferential treatment. But I'm hopeful that the judge will actually consider the validity of the evidence just specifically to the plea agreement, which is really what they would be there for today.
So prosecutors are going to recommend their sentence during today's hearing. If the judge signs off on the plea agreement, do we expect Hunter Biden will be sentenced today?
I do expect he'll be sentenced today. Typically, when there is a plea agreement where all of the conditions are satisfied, the sentence will begin that day, particularly here where Hunter Biden will be expected to enter into that diversionary program for that gun charge. So I expect the probation to start today. Of course, they'll have to meet with the probation department and make sure all the conditions are met. But I do expect that to lead today.
Kristen, while we have you, I also want to ask you about Biden's felony gun charge, which is facing some legal challenges. So last month, we had a federal appeals court rule that the government cannot ban those convicted of nonviolent crimes from possessing a weapon. And then a federal court in Texas recently ruled that the ban on drug users possessing weapons violates the Second Amendment. Any of that, is that going to impact Hunter Biden's case here?
I don't think so. This particular type of deal, it's very actually common for first-time offenders as well as individuals who are committing nonviolent offenses. In this particular case, keep in mind, Hunter Biden, it is a gun charge, but he is specifically being scrutinized or criminalized because of the unlawful conduct of falsifying the gun charge by saying that, that he wasn't a substance abuser, which he was. So in this particular case where he's taking responsibility, coupled with the tax charges where it's reported that he did pay back the back taxes with interest, it is not uncommon for an individual first offender like this to be given a diversionary program where the charge will be expunged or dropped as opposed to a conviction if he follows by the conditions of that diversionary program.
All right. Kristen Gibbons-Fedden, as always, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Turning now overseas, Marine veteran Trevor Reed has been injured while fighting in Ukraine. That's according to the State Department. Reed was previously jailed in Russia for 3 years before being released in 2022 in a prisoner exchange. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel joins us now with more on what we know. Richard.
Good morning, Stephen. Yes, he's been injured, and this morning, White House officials are not pleased with Trevor Reed. The White House worked hard to secure his release, only to see him go back to the region to fight against Russia. And now they're worried that that move could make it more difficult to free other Americans being held in Russia.
You can say one thing about Trevor Reed. He is determined. The Marine veteran from Texas was arrested in Russia in 2019 while visiting a girlfriend. He was accused of getting into a drunken brawl with police. The U.S. ambassador to Moscow at the time called the charges, quote, theater of the absurd. After nearly 3 years, often in solitary confinement, Reed was released in 2022, swapped for a convicted Russian cocaine trafficker serving in the United States. The exchange filmed on a tarmac in Turkey. Back home, Reed expressed appreciation to the Biden administration, mixed with criticism for not doing enough to release other Americans held by Russia.
Yeah, that frustrates me that they're not doing more. The White House, has that position to go out and say, yeah, we're going to make this exchange. We're going to get these guys back for this guy. And, they have the ability to do that. So why they haven't already done that, is a little bit beyond me.
After that, Reed signed up to be a volunteer for Ukraine to fight against Russia. A Pentagon official confirms he's being treated at a U.S. military hospital in Germany.
I want to be explicitly clear about something. Mr. Reed was not engaged in any activities on behalf of the U.S. government.
Off camera, the White House is less diplomatic. An official telling NBC News of extreme concern that Reed's actions could hamper the government's ability to bring other Americans home. Russia is holding journalist Evan Gershkovich and Marine veteran Paul Whelan, also on trumped-up charges, according to U.S. officials.
The White House worries the fact that Reed went to fight against Russia makes it harder to argue that Russia should let other Americans go. And Reed's family is keeping silent. Stephen?
All right, some unexpected developments there. Richard, thank you.
Now to our climate in crisis and two new reports sounding the alarm about the future of the planet. We're going to start with the record-breaking heat wave and the East Coast now bracing for triple-digit temperatures that have been baking much of the West and South over the last month. This was the scene yesterday here in New York, where a severe thunderstorm brought hail and wind to the area ahead of those triple-digit temps expected to hit later this week. Governor Kathy Hochul is already calling on residents to conserve electricity ahead of the heat wave. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa has more on that and the extreme heat and the impact our use of fossil fuels is having.
Bit of a chaotic morning here in Minneapolis with severe storms rolling through. We actually had to take cover inside a parking garage because there was lightning throughout the morning. And our affiliate reporting now in this heat, thousands are without power. They're also reporting possible damage to buildings and down trees. This is just the latest layer in this brutal stretch of severe summer weather that is sparing no corner of the U.S.
This morning, in the latest chapter of a mounting climate crisis, severe heat from coast to coast.
We usually keep our windows closed, not letting the sun come through because that adds a lot of extra heat.
The same monster heat wave that's kept Phoenix clocking in at 110 degrees or higher for a record 26 straight days and counting.
Third time this year, we've reached 119 degrees.
Now barreling toward the East Coast, where Boston's mayor has declared a heat emergency, with New York and Washington, D.C. bracing for near triple-digit temps this week. Both cities forecasted to feel like 105. In Connecticut, kids are already struggling on the softball field.
We have neck fans, and for the girls, we provide cooling towels that we keep in ice water.
The prolonged heat stretch marked by a sobering new study blaming this month's scorching temps squarely on man's climate crisis. The study saying this heat wave would have been virtually impossible if humans had not warmed the planet by burning fossil fuels. In the Midwest, Canadian wildfire smoke again cloaking Chicago, Detroit, and Minneapolis. Advocates in Minneapolis passing out cold water to the homeless.
We let them know, hydrate, do you need more water? You got to hydrate.
While families seek relief lakeside.
How much does this beach help?
Oh, it helps a whole lot.
And as this extreme heat settles into the Midwest, local hospitals say they're already seeing a rise in cases of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Doctors are pleading with people to stay hydrated and stay in the air conditioning as much as possible. And that being said, utility providers say the grid is holding strong, but make no mistake, they say demand is soaring. And given that, they've released some tips to help keep your homes cool. They say keep your drapes or your blinds closed during the day. Run ceiling fans counterclockwise to circulate cooler air throughout your home. And run dishwashers, washing machines, and other major appliances with full loads, and also run them before or after the hottest parts of the day. Again, all of that tips to keep energy costs down and keep your home cool in this extreme summer heat. Back to you.
All right, Maggie, thank you. All right, now for a closer look at how this summer heat is affecting us. Let's get a check of your morning news now weather. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Stephen, great to see you. Well, it looks like we could all use those tips because we are looking at that heat expanding across the country. It is coast-to-coast heat, most of us above normal in terms of temperatures, with the exception of the Pacific Northwest. So that's one of the stories. We're also busy in terms of severe weather. Maggie sort of touched upon that in portions of the Great Lakes. That's going to be the bullseye for some storms as we go throughout today. Into the later part of today, could see some really gusty winds, some hail, the chance of a tornado or two. And then we continue that record warm from the southwest, very hot and humid throughout the south. and even up into the Northeast. We're going to add in that humidity, so it's going to feel warmer than it actually is. Heat alerts for so many of us, 108 million people impacted. You can see them across the country from the Southwest to the South Central states, the Central Plains, Northern Plains, Midwest, into the Northeast. You get the idea. Most of us are under a heat alert. The Southeast also seeing some heat alerts. Miami, you're under a heat advisory. That's in the orange. Excessive heat warnings in the pink. Phoenix, you're going to see temperatures once again soaring into the triple digits. So there they are, 111 today in Las Vegas, 118 in Phoenix. We put the heat index on here too because that's a big factor as you're out and about. That's how it feels on your body. That's how taxing it is to your body. So Chicago feeling like 97 degrees today. St. Louis, you're going to feel like 104. Wichita feeling like 102. Same story tomorrow. We're going to keep that heat in place. It's going to expand as we go towards the east. So New York City tomorrow, the air temperature 98 degrees. It's going to feel like 105. This is the hottest temperature we felt all summer long in portions of the Northeast. Chicago feeling like 95. Kansas City, you have a heat index of 105, the air temperature of 100. And you're hot too in Denver, 93 degrees. So as we go throughout the weekend, we're going to be sweltering in so many spots. We get a little break though in the Northeast. Notice in New York City, Friday, 96, Saturday 93, but we get that big dip on Sunday, 83 degrees. We have a front that's going to come through. It's going to bring some storms late into Saturday into Sunday, but it's going to bring relief too on Sunday. Richmond, 98 degrees on Saturday, dipping to 88 on Sunday. But we're going to keep it warm throughout the Southeast, the Little Rock, Central Plains, Little Rock. We're going to be at 100 degrees on Sunday. Heat indices very high as we go throughout Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're looking at Nashville, 107 on Friday, 104 on Saturday, and 101 on Sunday. That's the heat story. Then we are watching late July storms. We have a lot of heat in the air. We have a lot of moisture in the air. We have a frontal boundary that's moving through the Great Lakes. That will come together. Those are the ingredients we need for a storm. And we're going to see some strong storms in the Great Lakes. The severe risk from eastern Iowa through Ohio. So we're looking at enhanced risk. That's a stronger risk than what we're used to. We're looking at the strong risk throughout portions of Detroit. Then tomorrow we're going to see those showers and storms tracking towards the East Coast. So a slow commute along the I-95 corridor. Remember, yesterday we had those strong storms that came through. We saw a lot of flash flooding in some spots because we have a lot of moisture in the air. It's going to bring out like a sponge, and we're going to see some heavy downpours. 24 million people at risk this afternoon and evening. We're seeing those storms right now, though. We kind of overlapped radar on top of this, so we do have some heavy downpours, some lightning throughout portions of the Midwest, the Great Lakes. Winds gusting up to 65 miles per hour. Could see some hail. Also, a few tornadoes are possible. I mentioned that enhanced risk. That's where you see that orange area, so Detroit, Fort Wayne, Kalamazoo. But certainly could see some strong storms in Chicago, Columbus, Cleveland, and that could make for some ground stops in terms of the airport. So we'll watch that as we go throughout the afternoon hours. But notice those brighter colors. That's where we're seeing the heaviest rainfall. This is all moving off to the east, and that's why we're expecting those storms throughout the Great Lakes later on this afternoon and evening. Heavy downpours where you see those brighter colors. That's where we're expecting the heaviest amount of rain, but it really could drop anywhere. That's throughout the Great Lakes into portions of the Northeast. Tomorrow, we're going to see some heavy storms in the Northeast along the I-95 corridor. We're looking, Stephen, at some big cities, New York City, Philadelphia, D.C., also Boston. 54 million people at risk for some really gusty winds. Also the chance of a tornado or two. Back to you.
Wow, a lot going on there, Michelle. And while we have you, I actually wanted to ask you about this new report that concerns ocean temperatures. Off of Florida's coast, the temperatures are so high, they're seeing coral bleaching. And now there's this new report out saying that rising temperatures in the Atlantic could cause a collapse of the ocean currents and the jet stream. I'm married to a meteorologist, so I hear the term jet stream all the time. No, it's very important, but how are these things connected?
Yes, you are right. I know it's a lot of jargon, and you probably do hear it at home, but the study shows you that the rising temperatures is slowing the jet stream. So what does that mean to us? Well, the jet stream is really just like a quarter of wind. So it's sort of like how I like to think of it is it's like a conveyor belt at the grocery store, right? You put your groceries on, everything moves out. The jet stream moves our weather systems out. So if it starts to slow down because of the warmer ocean temperatures, we're going to see a slowing in the atmosphere. And that's what we're seeing right now with this heat wave in place. The heat starts to build up. Again, think of that conveyor belt. If that belt starts to slow or maybe it gets a little bit hotter, things start to slow down, things start to kind of crash into each other. And that's what's happening. So we're seeing those slowdown and kind of a traffic jam in the atmosphere. Also, we're adding heat to it. So warming temperatures adds heat to the atmosphere. 1 degree increase in temperature equals 4% more water, and that's why we're seeing those flash flooding events as well. So it's all tied together. Stephen?
Wow. All connected. Important stuff there. Thanks for breaking that down, Michelle. We appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, coming up this hour on Morning News Now, it's only rock and roll for Rolling Stone superstar Mick Jagger, who turns 80, yes, 80 years old today. Joe's got to look back at his decades in the spotlight and what's next for this legendary frontman a little later this hour. But first, new developments in those Gilgo Beach murders on Long Island. The search of the suspect's home now completed. We've got the very latest on what authorities found. That's coming up next. We're back now with new developments in the Gilgo Beach murders investigation. After a 12-day hunt for evidence, authorities have now ended their search of the suspect's Long Island home. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa joins us now for more and for the latest. Emily, good morning.
Stephen, good morning to you. As Rex Heuermann remains in jail on suicide watch, according to police, authorities are poring over what they described as a massive amount of evidence from his cluttered home, including nearly 280 guns, all while the multi-agency Gilgo Task Force is beginning to expand its investigation.
After combing for clues for nearly 2 weeks, an exhaustive search of the Long Island home belonging to Gilgo murder suspect Rex Heuermann is over.
We have obtained a massive amount of material.
Now, officials are stressing patience as they analyze and catalog what they found, removing box after box of material from the premises. Investigators finding a walk-in vault equipped with an iron door in the home and saying they seized 279 weapons. An excavator and ground-piercing technology were also used to examine Heuermann's backyard, where it does not appear remains were found.
There is a whole entire trace analysis that we have to go through with the house with regard to hair fibers, DNA, blood.
The painstaking process playing out since the architect and father of two was arrested near his Manhattan office earlier this month, charged with killing 3 women, all sex workers, more than a decade ago. And Heuermann's the lead suspect in a 4th death, too. His wife, who investigators say was away during the killings, has since filed for divorce and is going through a devastating time, according to her attorney, as police in other states are looking into potential connections to other unsolved crimes, including in Las Vegas, Nevada, where he had a timeshare, and in Atlantic City, New Jersey, for possible ties to the 2006 Eastbound Strangler case.
I know that I was there as a potential victim.
Former escort Nikki Brass says Heuermann brought up the Gilgo murders on a date back in 2015.
But at one point, he said, "How do you think they got rid of the bodies?"
Sensing something wasn't right, Brass refused to go back to his house, but never alerted authorities, fearing her own legal trouble.
I honestly think had I gone back with him, I wouldn't be here today.
The Gilgo Task Force is now expanding its investigation to other cold cases on Long Island.
And the district attorney still would not say whether anyone was killed at Heuermann's home. While the search at his property has wrapped up, police will continue to have a presence there, warning people lingering near the home will be summoned to court. Heuermann has pleaded not guilty to the murders and will appear in court next week. I should also mention we reached out to his attorney and have not heard back.
So many people interested in this case.
Absolutely.
Emily,
yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Stephen.
Well, a federal judge has blocked part of the Biden administration's policy for asylum seekers at the U.S.-Mexico border, calling it invalid. The rule requires asylum seekers to either make an asylum hearing appointment at a legal point of entry or prove that they've already tried getting asylum in another country. First, the rule was aimed at cutting the number of migrants crossing the border. Well, Justice Department lawyers now say they plan to appeal the decision, and the case could end up at the Supreme Court. Well, a federal judge has vacated the court-martial conviction and dishonorable discharge of former Army soldier Bo Bergdahl. Bergdahl was accused of desertion and misbehavior before the enemy in Afghanistan back in 2009. Well, it wasn't until 3 years later that a military judge officially handed down that dishonorable discharge. That ruling has now been vacated after it was found that the judge had also applied to be an immigration judge. He failed to disclose that measure, which could have presented a potential conflict of interest in that case. Turning now to international headlines, North Korea opens its border to welcome Russian and Chinese officials. Claudio Lavanga joins us now with Rome for that and more. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, guys. That's right. Russian and Chinese delegates were invited to North Korea for the first time since its lockdown for the 70th anniversary commemorations of the Korean War. Now, the war will display its latest weaponry in its signature military parade on Thursday. Top brass officials include the Russian defense minister and policymaker of China's Communist Party, hoping to reaffirm its political ties. Now to Japan, where recent government data shows the fastest decrease of Japanese nationals ever, while foreign residents have risen exponentially to almost 3 million. Japan has seen a steady decline of the number of residents in all 47 prefectures, whereas the amount of foreigners rose by more than 10.5%. Japan is addressing the decrease by employing more women and approving 3.5 trillion yen per year towards childcare. And finally, let's come back here in nearby Vatican City, where the Pope extended his support toward the LGBTQ community. In a podcast, Pope Francis said, "God loves us as we are," after a 20-year-old transgender said they were torn by their faith and identity. The Pope has previously condemned laws that criminalize being LGBTQ, guys.
All right, Claudio, thanks so much for that. Well, coming up, you could say the White House's first dog is going through a little bit of a rough patch. We've got more on the string of newly disclosed biting incidents that's proving to be a bit of a hairy situation for the Biden administration. That's coming up next. Welcome back. An update this morning on the 4 college students who were murdered in Idaho last November. The defense team for the man accused of that gruesome crime is now suggesting that their client may not have been at the crime scene at all. NBC News Now anchor Gotti Schwartz joins us with more of this latest twist in the case, Gotti.
Hey, good morning, Stephen. Yeah, it is the latest development in what has already been an unusual road to trial that doesn't even start for 3 more months. Now, ahead of a court deadline, Kohlberger's team just dropped some documents that experts say aim to create doubt about his involvement at the crime scene.
All rise.
In a last-minute move to present an alibi, attorneys for Brian Kohlberger are now suggesting the man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students in November may not have been at the crime scene when the killings took place. In court documents filed Tuesday, the defense writes evidence corroborating Mr. Kohlberger being at a location other than the King Road address will be disclosed. And while the defense did not provide further detail about where Kohlberger may have been, they say his whereabouts may come to light at a trial through cross-examination and expert witness testimony. Part of the investigation, the discovery of a white Hyundai Elantra that was seen at the crime scene the morning of the murders.
How y'all doing today?
It's the same make and model Kohlberger owns, and police stopped him in weeks before his arrest.
Do me a favor, don't follow too close, okay?
This is just the latest attempt to cast doubts on the state's case and the investigation after prosecutors said Kohlberger's DNA was a statistical match to DNA found on a knife sheath at the crime scene. Last month, the defense suggested that evidence may have been planted, writing, "The state's argument assumes the DNA on the sheath was placed there by Mr. Kohlberger and not someone else during an investigation that spans hundreds of members of law enforcement and apparently at least one lab that the state refuses to name."
Not guilty of the crime of murder.
The filing, reminiscent of another high-profile trial in 1995 when O.J. Simpson's defense claimed a blood-stained glove was planted at their client's home. The jury in that case famously acquitted Simpson. In May, a not guilty plea was entered by the judge on Kohlberger's behalf. He faces 4 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. With this trial set to start in October, the University of Idaho now says it will wait until then to demolish the house where the quadruple killings occurred. The decision comes after the victims' families asked for the house to be preserved.
I don't want somebody in the court case say, well, I really wish we could be in the house right now.
And again, Stephen, any semblance of a defense is extremely tough to get a full picture on because of that gag order still in place. So we may not know the full details of an alibi or a defense strategy until the trial starts later this year. Stephen?
Still so many questions. All right, Gotti, thank you.
From the White House to the doghouse, Commander, the German Shepherd that belongs to the Bidens, has reportedly bitten several Secret Service agents and staff members from October of 2022 to January of this year. That's according to emails obtained by a conservative watchdog agency, which says there were at least 10 incidents of dog bites in that time frame. NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell is on Paw Patrol for us this morning.
A rough patch for the first dog, Commander Biden, over a string of newly disclosed biting incidents involving Secret Service agents and officers.
Look, the first family is working through ways to make this situation better for everyone.
Commander is a nearly 2-year-old German Shepherd.
Hey, pal.
Often spotted on the White House grounds or with his people, including the president. A conservative group, Judicial Watch, sued the Department of Homeland Security to obtain internal Secret Service records related to dog bites and found 10 instances between October of last year and January. From a November 3rd email, one time in the upper right arm and a second bite on the officer's thigh. The White House medical unit made the decision to have the officer transported to the hospital. A week later, a memo describes, while First Lady Jill Biden was walking him in the Kennedy Garden, the officer was bitten on the left thigh. Dog behavior expert Laura Sharkey says dogs often bite out of fear or stress, adding Commander's breed is known for being protective.
What makes a guard dog a good guard dog is being suspicious of strangers. And I think the White House is probably a uniquely challenging environment.
The Secret Service says it takes employee safety extremely seriously, and dog bites are treated like any other workplace injuries. The White House added leash rules and more training. Sharkey says steps to make Commander feel more comfortable could reduce risks.
All behavior is changeable. The question is going to be, is it changeable enough in this situation?
And so these incidents happened when Commander was about 1 year old, and they ranged from nips to teeth-marked bites. And the Secret Service points out that its agents and officers do not handle or care for presidential pets. That is done by members of the White House resident staff and others, but not the agents and officers, which in some ways can make them strangers to a dog. The White House is adding those leash protocols, as they describe them, and also creating some designated areas here at the White House where Commander can run and exercise, and to make sure that personnel know what is Commander's turf in these instances.
All right, Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, thank you so much.
Good to see you, Joe.
Well, we're following some breaking news out of Midtown Manhattan, where a crane has partially collapsed after a fire. Take a look at this. This is just a few blocks west of Times Square. You can see firefighters spraying water now on the part of the crane that's still standing. Now take a look at some of the incredible video captured the moment part of that crane came tumbling down. As you see there, it swipes part of that nearby building and sends debris falling down into the streets. Now, thankfully, right now, there are no reports of any injuries, but police are still asking people to avoid that area. We're continuing to follow this story. We'll bring you any more developments just as soon as they come in.
Still ahead, Hollywood may still be on hold, but how are those union strikes impacting the economy from coast to coast?
After the break, we'll take a closer look at the industries that have already been hit the hardest and take a look at whether there's any end in sight. Stick around. We're back now with a look at how the strikes in Hollywood are affecting the U.S. economy.
As actors and writers walk the picket lines for the second week of that historic double strike, this work stoppage is starting to have a financial impact with serious ripple effects. Caleb Silver is editor-in-chief at Investopedia, joins us now with more. Caleb, good to have you with us. So do we have any idea yet how much this strike is costing the U.S. economy and which industries are impacted the most?
Yeah, there's only estimates, and we've seen estimates as high as $4 billion, especially the longer it goes, the more it's going to cost. So there's obviously the stoppage of production. These writers, these actors are not getting paid. But think about all the small businesses impacted by this: caterers, makeup artists, sound people, electricians. The MTA, the Motion Picture Association, estimates that a major motion picture spends about $250,000 a day in the city when it's filming. TV shows about $150,000 a day. And there's about 122,000 small businesses tied in to the media and entertainment industries. All of them are being impacted. The longer it goes, the more it costs.
So those main production companies, of course, are headquartered in Los Angeles or here in New York. So are the other parts of the country, are they feeling effects from this as well?
Absolutely. You think about cities like Albuquerque, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Georgia, where a lot of film production and TV production has gone over the last few years for those tax credits. Those are in work stoppages as well. So this is not just a Hollywood story. Hollywood's the big name we all use. There's 120,000 people in that industry right here in New York. They're being impacted too.
So are the two sides at all close to a deal? Are they even talking right now? What is it looking like?
No, more and more strikes, more and more protests. Doesn't look like there's any negotiations going on that are meaningful. Remember, the writers want an 11% price hike. The actors also want an 11% price hike. The studios are only offering 5% more down the road. So we're impasse there. Then there's the AI issue, guaranteeing their work against artificial intelligence. Hard to do that when we don't know where that is going. And also the writers also want these shorter exclusivity deals with these streaming networks so the work can go on to other networks and they can get paid on those residuals. A lot of complicated factors here, but it's impacting not just these unions, which is very serious, but the industry at large and the businesses that support it.
It's some huge sticking points right now. All right, Caleb, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Team USA's women are gearing up for a heavyweight match in the World Cup against a pretty familiar rival.
Yeah, the team will face off against the Netherlands tonight. That's a repeat of the 2019 World Cup final. The U.S. came out on top in that match. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter has more from Wellington, New Zealand.
Guys, good morning from Wellington, New Zealand, from a raging late-night party. I am surrounded by American fans, very excited American fans from the American Outlaws, who cannot wait for that game against the Netherlands. Guys, let's hear it.
As temperatures dip here in Wellington, New Zealand, the U.S. women are gearing up for tonight's big game against the Netherlands, marching towards that history-making goal, a third straight World Cup title. In their first-round victory against Vietnam, 8 U.S. players, including 6 starters, made their World Cup debuts, including superstar forward 22-year-old Sophia Smith, scoring 2 goals. Veteran co-captain Alex Morgan saying afterwards there's clearly room to grow.
I think we saw a lot of glimpses of our potential, but I feel like we weren't always clicking on the field.
We caught up with the youngest player on the American team, 18-year-old Alyssa Thompson, who saw her first World Cup minutes in the second half.
This has been a dream for me since I can remember, so being here and just being on this team with a bunch of players that I've always looked up to has been so amazing.
Now the U.S. team traveling to their second New Zealand city for a much-anticipated second match.
This may be the windiest spot in all of Wellington, New Zealand, but what a view. You can see the entire city. You can even see that stadium where the U.S. will play the Netherlands.
We've run into American fans who have traveled so far and wide to cheer on their team.
I'm sorry, you said what? The winter?
Yeah, this wind is brutal. It's freezing.
Underneath those layers, Mitchell says he's sporting a Rose Lavelle jersey. The 28-year-old midfielder telling reporters today she's excited for a fun second match.
They have a lot of different threats. I think they're technical, good on set pieces, so I think it's going to be a tough game.
The two teams are familiar. The Americans beat the Dutch 2-0 to win the 2019 World Cup and again at the 2021 Tokyo Olympics
of Tokyo 2020
in dramatic penalty kicks. And on her youngest teammates, Lavelle is full of respect.
We have 14 new players to a World Cup, but I think they're 14 really, really freaking good players.
Now, did I mention it was late at night here in Wellington? We also just learned that U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken is in town. He met with the team. He'll be at the game tomorrow, but he's not going to be the only one at the game tomorrow.
We love you! We love you! We love you! And where you go, we'll follow! We'll follow! We'll follow! Because we support the U.S. The U.S. The U.S. And that's the way we like it! We like it! We love it!
All right, Molly, thank you so much. I want that soccer energy right now. All right. Vogue magazine is calling actress and comedian Liz Kingsman the new queen of British comedy. And after a successful run in London, she's hopped the pond to perform here in New York. I recently saw her one-woman show, which is called One Woman Show, and I'm very excited to have Liz here on set. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I know you were probably performing. Did you have a show last night?
I had a show
last night.
So
you're up early this morning.
I'm wide awake.
It's good to have you here. I want you to describe this show to people because I think you can do it best when a lot of people go, what is this? It's almost like poking fun. It's sort of the one-person show. I mean, tell us what it's about.
Very much poking fun at the concept of the one-woman show. It's so hard to describe, and you'd think I would know by now how to describe it. I actually prefer when other people do. But it's effectively a parody of, very sincere and profound moving theatre. But it is a comedy. It's a comedy version of a one-woman show, which I think I think a lot of people may have seen a one-woman show, but they're often one person playing all the characters and a monologue, you know, playing all characters and playing sort of versions of themselves and things like that.
I mean, there's kind of a joke in your world, right? If someone says, come see my one-woman show, they sort of go,
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
What was your inspiration for this?
You have to steel yourself for it. Yeah, the inspiration was sort of that feeling. It was. I wrote it in 2019, and in London, I don't know if it was the same here, but in London and around the UK at different festivals like Brighton Fringe and Edinburgh Fringe, you just couldn't move for one-woman shows. There were so many happening at that moment. I think there was just a big surge in them, and I found it quite funny. I thought it would be funny to do a joke version, basically.
People are getting the joke, right?
I hope so. I really hope so. Yeah, some audiences less than others, but yeah, no. On the whole, people have got the joke.
I mentioned Vogue called you the British Queen of Comedy. How do you react when something like that is thrust upon you as a label?
Just climb under the desk. And I'll never create anything ever again, basically. But yeah, it was pretty astounding that Vogue said that. Thanks, Vogue.
You've been quoted as saying, dumb is a high compliment.
Yes.
Talk more about that. I mean, are you worried, especially as we've emerged from the pandemic, that comedy's feeling a little dark these days?
It can do. I think comedy is so subjective. Some people really like comedy that comes from trauma and from, you know, like, because anything that's sad in life is also a bit funny. But for me, personally, I just love really, really stupid comedy. I mean, again, stupid as high praise. Stuff that's really high commitment to very, very silly things is my favourite kind of comedy. So I kind of just decided to write what I enjoy watching.
Your character, which I guess is you, sort of in this?
Yeah. I play a writer-performer who's sort of fame-hungry, and she's never named in the show, but people think it's a version of me.
Is it?
I've certainly looked at some of my worst aspects and dialed them up, but I've also tried. I mean, yeah, she's a sort of amalgamation of my worst fears.
This person doesn't love the job she's in right now. Do you have like good advice for people who maybe aren't digging their jobs right now?
Just leave your jobs. You know, life's too short, right? I do love my job, so I can't relate, but I have had jobs that I hate, so yeah.
You've performed in West End in London, you've been at Sydney Opera House, now you are here. How much longer are you here for? Just
over 2 weeks, yeah. It's whizzed by. I haven't left Greenwich Village, essentially. Why would I? Everything I need is there. It's gone so fast, and I'm almost at the end of this crazy 4-year journey with this show. And I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am without it. So we'll find out in 2 weeks.
Yeah, you got 30 seconds left here. What's next for you?
Oh, my gosh, I'm going to have a big nap.
How long?
At least a year.
Okay.
At least 1 year nap, and then I'll think about what the next thing is that I want to poke fun at. I don't know. We'll see.
There's so many things.
I need to do some reading and some research, right?
There you go. The world is your oyster for poking fun at, right?
After a good sleep.
All right.
Yeah.
Liz Kingsman, the show is fantastic. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do. You can get it through August 11th at the Greenwich House Theater in Manhattan. One-woman show. It is a one-woman show. Liz Kingsman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, we are officially now 1 year out from the Paris Summer Games. After the break, we've got a preview of what to expect. Stick around. Now to France, where the countdown is on for the 2024 Olympic Games.
Yeah, that's right. Today marks exactly 1 year until the opening ceremonies begin in Paris, and the city is hosting several events throughout the day to celebrate. NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now for more on that from Paris. So, Keir, good morning to you. Let's talk about the unveiling of the torch this morning. Are we learning more about the design? And we also heard an Olympic legend is there to help.
We sure did, Stephen. Just before I get to that, let me just give you a live shot. Beneath the Eiffel Tower there is the Olympic clock now ticking. You'll see that it says 366 days because, of course, next year is a leap year. But what an Olympic year is going to be. Beneath the Eiffel Tower there is going to be an opening ceremony in a year's time like no other on the River Seine. And you're right, Stephen, I got to talk to Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world, of course, who was there to launch the Olympic torch. This being France, of course, it is champagne-coloured. The bottom of the torch represents water because the flame is going to be brought from Greece on a boat, then travel around France, of course, and then for that opening ceremony on the Seine as thousands line the banks. It's going to be a spectacular start to an Olympics that the IOC president is describing as a new era.
So, Keir, I know Olympic officials are putting a special emphasis on making the Paris Games more sustainable, eco-friendly. What exactly does that look like?
Yeah. That's exactly right, Joe. You know, what they're doing, for example, is using the city like the Eiffel Tower. It's amazing monuments and locations. There'll be beach volleyball underneath the Eiffel Tower, that open-air opening ceremony. So that's one way of not building so much and thereby being more sustainable. They say they're going to cut the carbon footprint by half. They're spending more than $1 billion on new rail transportation and saying, if you're going to come here, walk around, use a bicycle, use public transport. So that is the ambition. They admit it's a challenging one, but those are the kinds of things they're doing to try to make this, because there are going to be many more people here than in recent years. Remember the previous Olympics with the coronavirus? That's what they're doing to try to make this more ecological, if you like, than London or Rio.
A good cause there. So, Kira, what other events can we expect to see today? And wondering if the European heat wave has put a damper at all on these celebrations.
You know, it hasn't been too bad, the weather here in Paris. Actually, it's been raining over the past few days. Of course, that is a concern. And there is talk about coming up with cooling mechanisms to help the athletes when the events happen. Because, you know, the weather in a year's time is unpredictable. It is a worry, just like so many things. Climate change worries sports athletes and events like the Olympics because it's during the summer. I will tell you, though, they also now are out with the Olympic swag, so if it does get too hot or if it rains, you can always don that. How about that? Trey chic, right?
That is a sharp-looking hat here.
Yes, solid. All right, sold. Keir Simmons, thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
Let's end the hour with some birthday news. Today, Rolling Stones frontman Mick Jagger is marking a major milestone. He's turning 80. Well, he can't always get what he wants. He has given us 8 decades of entertainment, and all signs suggest there's more to come. After 80 years, you've got to think Mick Jagger finally got at least some satisfaction. After all, he's a father of 8, has been knighted at Buckingham Palace, and leads one of the most successful bands in music history. A few years ago, Jagger told Today how he measures satisfaction.
Longevity is important, and but, you know, having fun is more important, possibly.
He's been having fun since the 60s.
Going round and round.
Back when the Stones first appeared on Ed Sullivan. The song, Time Is On My Side. That wasn't just a cover. Those lyrics were a prophecy. Last year, the Stones celebrated their 60th anniversary by shimmying across Europe, a tour that stopped in 14 cities. Jagger told the Sunday Times, rock and roll, or any type of pop music, honestly, isn't supposed to be done when you're in your 70s. It wasn't designed for that. To stay in shape, he said, I do dancing, gym, every day of the week. I don't enjoy it very much, but it has to be done. Just last month, his legendary moves, though slightly subdued, were spotted on the dance floor at a gala in New York. He had just attended the ballet with his partner of 9 years, former ballerina Melanie Hamrick. She stopped by Hoda and Jenna and talked about the support she gets from Mick.
And he's always like, you're a ballerina, you're an author. He's very supportive of reminding me of those things. Like, you wrote a book, like, be proud. So we keep lifting each other up, and I remind myself, like, you know, I'm not just someone's partner. But his music.
Together, they have a 6-year-old son, Devereaux, who clearly has his own moves like Jagger. A couple years ago, Little Debbie's dad did debut a new song he wrote about pandemic life. It was called Easy Sleazy. So, could we hear any other original tunes from the Stones in the near future? Well, this year, bandmate Keith Richards offered a hint.
There's some new music on its way, and hopefully you'll get to see it.
New music at age 80? Proof that you can sometimes get what you want. So how is Mick Jagger celebrating his 80th? Well, there were reports in British tabloids that a big swanky bash was planned with like 300 folks on the guest list, but no confirmation from his reps at this point. So we'll have to wait and see. Could also do just a quiet evening at home with the family, practicing some of those dance moves.
Yeah, it seems like their son, Devereaux, also got the dance moves.
Exactly.
Runs in the family.
80 years from now, we'll be talking about his longevity in the business. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Your news continues right now.
Now to France, where the countdown is on for the 2024 Olympic Games.
Yeah, that's right. Today marks exactly 1 year until the opening ceremonies begin in Paris, and the city is hosting several events throughout the day to celebrate. NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now for more on that from Paris. So, Keir, good morning to you. Let's talk about the unveiling of the torch this morning. Are we learning more about the design? And we also heard an Olympic legend is there to help.
We sure did, Stephen. Just before I get to that, let me just give you a live shot. Beneath the Eiffel Tower there is the Olympic clock now ticking. You'll see that it says 366 days because, of course, next year is a leap year. But what an Olympic year is going to be. Beneath the Eiffel Tower there is going to be an opening ceremony in a year's time like no other on the River Seine. And you're right, Stephen. I got to talk to Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world, of course, who was there to launch the Olympic torch. This being France, of course, it is champagne-coloured. At the bottom of the torch represents water because the flame is going to be brought from Greece on a boat, then travel around France, of course, and then for that opening ceremony on the Seine as thousands line the banks. It's going to be a spectacular start to an Olympics that the IOC president is describing as a new era.
So, Keir, I know Olympic officials are putting a special emphasis on making the Paris Games more sustainable, eco-friendly. What exactly does that look like?
Yeah. That's exactly right, Joe. You know, what they're doing, for example, is using the city like the Eiffel Tower. It's amazing monuments and locations. There'll be beach volleyball underneath the Eiffel Tower, that open-air opening ceremony. So that's one way of not building so much and thereby being more sustainable. They say they're going to cut the carbon footprint by half. They're spending more than $1 billion on new rail transportation and saying, if you're going to come here, walk around, use a bicycle, use public transport. So that is the ambition. They admit it's a challenging one, but those are the kinds of things they're doing to try to make this, because there are going to be many more people here than in recent years. Remember the previous Olympics with the coronavirus? That's what they're doing to try to make this more ecological, if you like, than London or Rio.
A good cause there. So, Keir, what other events can we expect to see today? And wondering if the European heat wave has put a damper at all on these celebrations.
You know, it hasn't been too bad, the weather here in Paris. Actually, it's been raining over the past few days. Of course, that is a concern. And there is talk about coming up with cooling mechanisms to help the athletes when the events happen. Because, you know, the weather in a year's time is unpredictable. It is a worry, just like so many things. Climate change worries sports athletes and events like the Olympics because it's during the summer. I will tell you, though, they also now are out with the Olympic swag. So if it does get too hot or if it rains, you can always don that. How about that? Très chic, right?
That is a sharp-looking hat here.
Yes, solid. All right, sold. Keir Simmons, thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
Let's end the hour with some birthday news. Today, Rolling Stones frontman Mick Jagger is marking a major milestone. He's turning 80. Well, he can't always get what he wants. He has given us 8 decades of entertainment, and all signs suggest there's more to come. After 80 years, you've got to think Mick Jagger finally got at least some satisfaction. After all, he's a father of 8, has been knighted at Buckingham Palace, and leads one of the most successful bands in music history. A few years ago, Jagger told Today how he measures satisfaction.
Longevity is important, and but having fun is more important, possibly.
He's been having fun since the 60s.
Going round and round.
Back when the Stones first appeared on Ed Sullivan. The song, Time Is On My Side. That wasn't just a cover, those lyrics were a prophecy. Last year, the Stones celebrated their 60th anniversary by shimmying across Europe, a tour that stopped in 14 cities. Jagger told the Sunday Times, rock and roll, or any type of pop music, honestly, isn't supposed to be done when you're in your 70s. It wasn't designed for that. To stay in shape, he said, I do dancing, gym, every day of the week. I don't enjoy it very much, but it has to be done. Just last month, his legendary moves, though slightly subdued, were spotted on the dance floor at a gala in New York. He had just attended the ballet with his partner of 9 years, former ballerina Melanie Hamrick. She stopped by Hoda and Jenna and talked about the support she gets from Mick.
And he's always like, you're a ballerina, you're an author. He's very supportive of reminding me of those things. Like, you wrote a book, like, be proud. So we keep lifting each other up, and I remind myself, like, I'm not just someone's partner.
But his music.
Together, they have a 6-year-old son, Devereaux, who clearly has his own moves like Jagger. A couple years ago, Little Debbie's dad did debut a new song he wrote about pandemic life. It was called Easy Sleazy. So could we hear any other original tunes from the Stones in the near future? Well, this year bandmate Keith Richards offered a hint.
There's some new music on its way, and hopefully you'll get to see you.
New music at age 80? Proof that you can sometimes get what you want. So how is Mick Jagger celebrating his 80th? Well, there were reports in British tabloids that a big swanky bash was planned with like 300 folks on the guest list, but no confirmation from his reps at this point. So we'll have to wait and see. Could also do just a quiet evening at home with the family, practicing some of those dance moves.
Yeah, it seems like their son, Devereaux, also got the dance moves.
Exactly.
Runs in the family.
80 years from now, we'll be talking about his longevity in the business. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Your news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.